Ciao. From RAZR to ruin. How Motorola lost the smartphone revolution. In 2004, Motorola unveiled what would become one of the most iconic mobile phones in history. The Motor RAZR V3 wasn't just a phone, it was a statement. At just 13.9 millimeters thin, it redefined what consumers expected from mobile devices. The phone's sleek aluminum body, distinctive external antenna, and razor-sharp design language made it an instant cultural phenomenon. Celebrities carried it, teenagers coveted it, and business executives flaunted it as the ultimate status symbol. The RAZR's blue backlit keypad and internal color display were revolutionary for their time, while its clamshell design offered the perfect balance of style and functionality. Within months of its launch, the RAZR became the must-have accessory, spawning countless imitators but never truly being replicated. Motorola had achieved something remarkable. They had created a phone that transcended mere utility to become a fashion statement. The RAZR proved that consumers were hungry for devices that were both technologically advanced and aesthetically stunning, setting the stage for what should have been Motorola's dominance in the mobile revolution that was about to unfold. The numbers behind the RAZR's success were staggering and unprecedented in the mobile phone industry. Between 2004 and 2008, Motorola sold over 130 million RAZR units worldwide, making it one of the best-selling clamshell phones of all time. At its peak in 2006, the RAZR was selling at a rate of 2 million units per month, generating billions in revenue for Motorola and catapulting the company's mobile division to new heights. The phone's success was so overwhelming that it single-handedly revived Motorola's fortunes, transforming the company from a struggling also-ran into the second-largest mobile phone manufacturer in the world, trailing only Nokia. The RAZR's impact extended far beyond sales figures. It fundamentally shifted consumer expectations about phone design. Before the RAZR, phones were primarily judged on call quality, battery life, and basic functionality. The RAZR introduced the concept that phones could be luxury items, premium accessories that reflected the owner's taste and status. This shift in perception laid the groundwork for the smartphone revolution. Though ironically, Motorola would fail to capitalize on the very market transformation their own product had helped create. However, beneath the RAZR's glossy exterior and impressive sales figures lay a troubling pattern of strategic myopia that would ultimately prove fatal to Motorola's mobile ambitions. The company became intoxicated by the RAZR's success, pouring resources into creating variations and iterations of the same basic design rather than investing in next-generation technologies. Motorola launched the RAZR V3C, V3i, V3M, V3R, V3T, V3X, and numerous carrier-specific variants, each offering minor improvements but nothing fundamentally revolutionary. This approach worked initially, as consumers remained loyal to the RAZR brand, but it revealed a dangerous lack of long-term vision. While Motorola was busy perfecting the clamshell form factor, other companies were quietly developing technologies that would render the entire category obsolete. The company's research and development budget, which should have been focused on emerging technologies like touchscreens, mobile internet, and application ecosystems, was instead channeled into incremental improvements to existing products. Motorola's leadership, drunk on RAZR's success, failed to recognize that they had created a high-water mark in traditional mobile phone design just as the industry was about to undergo its most dramatic transformation in decades. The first warning signs of trouble appeared in 2007, when Apple introduced the iPhone and fundamentally redefined what a mobile phone could be. While Motorola was still focused on making their clamshell phones thinner and more stylish, Apple had created a pocket computer that happened to make phone calls. The iPhone's touchscreen interface, mobile web browsing capabilities, and integrated media player represented a quantum leap forward in mobile technology. More importantly, the iPhone demonstrated that consumers were ready to abandon traditional phone designs in favor of devices that offered unprecedented functionality. Motorola's response to this seismic shift was tepid and unfocused. The company's first touchscreen phone, the Motor RAZR V3, launched in late 2007 but retained the clamshell design that was rapidly becoming obsolete. While the V8 incorporated some smartphone features, including a secondary external touch display, it felt like a tentative half measure rather than a bold leap into the future. The phone's Linux-based operating system was clunky and unintuitive compared to the iPhone's revolutionary interface, and its limited app ecosystem paled in comparison to what Apple was building. Most critically, Motorola seemed to misunderstand the fundamental shift that was occurring. Phones were no longer primarily communication devices, but portable computing platforms that required entirely different approaches to hardware and software design. As the smartphone revolution accelerated, Motorola found themselves increasingly marginalized despite multiple attempts to regain relevance. The company's partnership with Google to develop Android-based phones initially showed promise, particularly with the launch of the original Motorola Droid in 2009. The Droid, marketed with Verizon's aggressive advertising campaign, became the first serious challenger to the iPhone and helped establish Android as a viable alternative to Apple's iOS. However, even this success was short-lived and ultimately highlighted Motorola's deeper structural problems. The company lacked the software expertise necessary to differentiate their Android devices from competitors' offerings, relying heavily on Google's reference designs rather than creating truly innovative user experiences. While companies like Samsung and HTC were developing custom interfaces and unique hardware features, Motorola's phones began to feel generic and interchangeable. The company's attempts at innovation often fell flat. The Moto Blur user interface, launched in 2010, was widely criticized for being slow and confusing, while hardware experiments like the dual-screen Echo and the ultra-thin Droid RAZR failed to capture consumers' imagination. By 2011, despite having invented the cell phone and created one of the most successful mobile devices in history, Motorola's smartphone market share had dwindled to just 2.4% globally. The root of Motorola's smartphone struggles lay in a fundamental misunderstanding of how the mobile industry was evolving. While the RAZR's success had been built on superior industrial design and manufacturing excellence, smartphones required entirely different competencies: software development, ecosystem management, and platform thinking. Motorola had always been a hardware company, focused on engineering elegant solutions to physical challenges like antenna design, battery life, and form factor optimization. The smartphone era demanded companies that could seamlessly integrate hardware and software, create compelling user experiences, and build relationships with developers and content creators. Apple's success with the iPhone wasn't just about having better hardware, it was about creating an entire ecosystem of apps, services, and accessories that made the device increasingly valuable over time. Google's Android strategy was similarly ecosystem-focused, providing free software to hardware manufacturers in exchange for data and advertising opportunities. Motorola, meanwhile, continued to think like a traditional hardware manufacturer, focusing on specs and features rather than holistic user experiences. The company's culture, which had been perfectly suited to the engineering challenges of traditional mobile phones, proved inadequate for the collaborative, software-intensive world of smartphones. Perhaps most damaging was Motorola's failure to invest adequately in the research and development necessary to compete in the smartphone era. While Apple was spending billions developing custom processors, advanced cameras, and revolutionary manufacturing techniques, Motorola was cutting R&D expenses to maintain short-term profitability. The company's annual research and development spending peaked at $9.1 billion in 2000, but had fallen to just $3.9 billion by 2010, even as the smartphone market was exploding. This reduction in investment was particularly devastating because smartphones required expertise in areas where Motorola had limited experience: advanced semiconductors, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud services, and software platforms. The company's attempts to catch up through acquisitions and partnerships proved insufficient. The 2010 acquisition of 3.5 Systems, a display technology company, and various smaller software firms failed to provide the comprehensive capabilities needed to compete with Apple and the emerging Android ecosystem. Meanwhile, competitors were making massive investments in next-generation technologies. Samsung was building advanced manufacturing capabilities for displays and processors, Google was developing AI and cloud services, and Apple was creating custom silicon that would eventually power everything from phones to computers. The final chapter of Motorola's mobile phone story unfolded between 2011 and 2014, as the company desperately sought a path back to relevance through a series of increasingly desperate moves. In January 2011, Motorola split into two companies: Motorola Mobility, focused on mobile devices and television set-top boxes, and Motorola Solutions, handling enterprise communications equipment. This division was intended to allow the mobile division to move more quickly and focus entirely on smartphones and tablets, but it also revealed just how far the company had fallen. Later that same year, Google announced it would acquire Motorola Mobility for $12.5 billion, a deal that was completed in May 2012. Industry observers hoped that Google's software expertise combined with Motorola's hardware heritage would create a formidable competitor to Apple and Samsung. However, the integration proved challenging, and Google seemed more interested in Motorola's patent portfolio than its phone business. During Google's ownership, Motorola continued to lose market share, with global smartphone sales falling from 4.8% in 2012 to just 1.2% in 2013. The company's attempts at innovation during this period, including the modular design concepts that would later influence Project Era, failed to gain traction in the marketplace. In January 2014, Google announced it would sell Motorola Mobility to Lenovo for $2.91 billion, representing a massive write-down on their original investment and effectively ending Motorola's run as an independent mobile phone manufacturer. The story of Motorola's fall from RAZR to ruin represents one of the most dramatic reversals of fortune in technology history, offering sobering lessons about the perils of success and the relentless pace of technological change. In less than a decade, Motorola went from selling 130 million units of one of the most successful phones ever created to being sold off in pieces, its mobile division worth less than a quarter of what Google had paid for it just 2 years earlier. The company's failure wasn't due to lack of engineering talent, manufacturing capability, or brand recognition. It was a failure of strategic vision and organizational adaptability. Motorola's leadership failed to recognize that the RAZR's success was both their greatest triumph and their greatest trap, creating a mindset that prioritized incremental improvement over revolutionary innovation. The mobile phone industry's transformation from a hardware-focused business to a software and services ecosystem required companies to develop entirely new capabilities and think in fundamentally different ways about product development, customer relationships, and competitive strategy. Companies that successfully navigated this transition, like Apple and Samsung, were willing to cannibalize their existing products and invest heavily in unproven technologies and new business models. Motorola, despite having the resources and market position to lead this transformation, instead chose to protect their existing business model until it was too late to change course. The broader implications of Motorola's decline extend far beyond the mobile phone industry, serving as a cautionary tale for any company operating in rapidly evolving technological markets. The RAZR's phenomenal success created a false sense of security that blinded Motorola to the fundamental shifts occurring in their industry. The company's leadership failed to distinguish between temporary competitive advantages, like superior industrial design, and sustainable competitive advantages, like platform control and ecosystem development. This distinction became crucial as smartphones evolved from standalone devices to nodes in larger digital ecosystems encompassing apps, services, cloud storage, and artificial intelligence. Motorola's story demonstrates how quickly technological disruption can render even the most successful products obsolete, and how companies must constantly reinvent themselves to remain relevant. The mobile phone industry's evolution from voice communication devices to pocket computers to AI-powered personal assistants happened so quickly that companies had to be simultaneously managing current products, developing next-generation technologies, and researching breakthrough innovations that wouldn't reach market for years. Motorola's failure to maintain this complex juggling act, combined with their over-reliance on past success, ultimately cost them their position as one of the mobile industry's defining companies. Today, while the Motorola brand continues under Lenovo's ownership, it serves primarily as a reminder of how quickly fortunes can change in the technology industry, and how yesterday's revolutionary innovations can become tomorrow's historical footnotes.